Welcome to the deep dive. I'm really glad you could join us today because we're exploring something truly fascinating and maybe a little surprising too. We're going to be decoding the euphemisms around, well, human waste. Yeah, you heard that right. We're kind of digging into this quirky world of terms like humanure and fecal sludge, trying to uncover what they really reveal about how we think, how we feel about this, universal topic that we often just don't talk about. And hey, as we get started, just a reminder, you can always find more thought-provoking deep dives like this one over at mindexpansiondaily.com. Please do like and subscribe while you're there. It really helps us build our global community as we unpack language and culture together. And look, if this topic sparks your curiosity, maybe consider supporting the show by buying us a coffee. The link's right there in the description. We'd genuinely love to hear from you on this one too. What's your take on these euphemisms? Drop a comment below with your thoughts and let us know where you're listening from. It helps us figure out how to expand our reach worldwide. You see, the language we use for human waste,
whether we call it night soil or something else, it carries all these layers: cultural, historical, social meaning, and it connects to a truly massive industry. Global waste management. It's projected to be a, get this, $2 trillion enterprise by 2025. Just huge. So our mission today, let's try to uncover the origins, the sort of hidden implications, and the cultural significance behind these terms. We'll be drawing on historical practices, linguistic studies, all sorts of things. Okay, so let's start maybe with night soil itself. The term sounds almost poetic, doesn't it?
It does have a certain ring to it.
But when you start to unpack it, you realize it points to a very practical historical reality. It literally means human waste collected under the cover of darkness, right? Often for a specific reason.
Exactly. And that collection happening at night, that was largely to avoid, well, public scrutiny, which tells you something right away about the social discomfort around it. Yet, despite that awkwardness, night soil was absolutely crucial, especially in agriculture. For centuries, we've got historical research showing that, say, in 19th century Europe and Asia, it was a cornerstone for fertilizing crops. It could boost yields by something like 20%. Pretty impressive.
20%? Wow.
Yeah. And think about medieval England. You had these figures called gong farmers.
Gong farmers. What a title.
Right. Their job was literally to clear out cesspits, and that waste, that gong, was then recycled directly onto the field.
That really highlights this incredible paradox, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You've got this super practical, economically vital use for human waste on one side, but then there's this profound social stigma attached to it on the other.
Yeah. And that stigma is incredibly powerful. It's almost universal, actually. Some anthropological analysis suggests around 70% of societies historically viewed excrement as taboo. And that fundamentally is why we get euphemisms. They're born from that need to kind of soften the reality.
It's fascinating, though, how even the term night soil itself, just by linking it to nighttime, manages to sound somewhat neutral, maybe even a bit poetic. Like we said, there was this social media post back in 2024, it got like 8,000 likes that joked, night soil sounds romantic until you realize it's just poop.
Huh. That captures it perfectly.
It really does. It shows how even a slightly softer term can mask the raw reality. And that's what these euphemisms do, isn't it? Things like sewage sludge or biosolids, they create this distance, an abstraction almost.
Yeah.
That's absolutely spot on. This universal taboo nature of human waste, it's a really deep-seated cultural thing. A 2023 study I saw mentioned that something like 80% of cultures associate it with shame. So this widespread stigma, that's the engine driving the creation of all these different euphemisms. They're basically linguistic tools, right? Designed to soften or sanitize or just abstract the topic completely to make it easier to talk about in public.
And we see such a huge range of them, don't we? You get the very clinical-sounding terms like fecal sludge. Apparently that pops up in about 60% of sanitation reports from places like the World Bank. It sounds scientific, sure, almost sterile. But what does it really tell you beyond just being a technical label?
Right.
Then you have the more eco-conscious terms, like humanure. That one's pretty popular in environmental circles. It immediately brings to mind sustainability, natural cycles.
Composting, that sort of thing.
Exactly. It seems like almost every culture finds its own way to reframe it. One linguistic review from 2024 suggested, I think, that 90% of waste-related terms exist mainly just to reduce discomfort.
90%?
Yeah. It's like navigating a linguistic minefield.
It is. But what's really intriguing here is that while these terms definitely reduce our discomfort, that very abstraction can unintentionally maybe hide some crucial environmental realities. Take biosolids, for example. That term's used by, 70% of U.S. wastewater facilities now?
Okay.
It sounds clean, like a reusable product almost. But environmental science studies, they've shown that maybe 50% of those biosolids actually contain microplastics.
Oh, wow. That's not so clean.
Not at all. And there was that social media thread, got about 12,000 likes, making exactly that point. Calling it biosolids hides the toxic truth.
Right.
And this is where language becomes a real policy issue. By softening the reality with these euphemisms, we risk creating this maybe false sense of things being under control. Studies suggest it can actually lead to delays or underestimation in policy decisions, maybe affecting around 30% of them.
30%. That's significant. It subtly becomes a barrier to taking action.
Precisely. A subtle linguistic barrier, but a barrier nonetheless.
So thinking historically, how did different cultures handle this? Because you mentioned the diversity.
Wow.
That must influence the language they use, right?
Hugely. Look at 18th century Japan. Night soil there wasn't just tolerated, it was a valued commodity.
Valued. How so?
Farmers would actually pay for it to fertilize their rice paddies. And this practice apparently led to about a 25% increase in rice yields.
That's incredible.
And their word for it, shinyo, it was pretty neutral, maybe even positive, given its value.
Okay, so that's one extreme. What about elsewhere?
Well, contrast that with, say, Victorian England. There, waste and night soil were increasingly seen as a major health hazard. It got directly linked to those devastating cholera outbreaks, like the one in 1849 killed 50,000 people.
Ooh.
Tragic.
Unbelievable.
So understandably, terms like sludge in England, they carried intensely negative connotations. Fear, disease, filth. It really shows how language reflects a society's direct experiences and priorities.
And these modern euphemisms we use now, they're still reflecting these things, right? Our past, but also ongoing cultural changes, new technologies.
Absolutely. You can see traces of it, like the nostalgic way night soil might pop up in some modern Japanese literature. That feels very different from the super technical term wastewater solids you hear more in the US. And these terms, they evolve right alongside sanitation tech. Think about the flush toilet. Since around 1900, its global spread basically reduced night soil collection by maybe 90%.
90%. That's a total transformation.
It completely changed the waste management landscape. As that one social media post put it, the one with 10,000 likes, night soil's history is wild fertilizer to taboo in a century.
Yeah, that really sums it up. Okay, let's bring this back to the challenges we face today. It seems pretty clear that these euphemisms really do shape how we perceive waste management now. You mentioned fecal sludge being used in, 80% of global sanitation programs? That term can make the problem sound manageable, almost clinical. But the reality, the stark reality, is 4.2 billion people worldwide still lack safe sanitation.
Exactly.
Which leads to something like 3.6 billion tons of untreated waste every year.
Yeah.
That's staggering.
And that's precisely the core issue here. These euphemisms, by sort of sugarcoating the problem, they obscure just how severe the challenge really is. Environmental policy studies have found that maybe up to 40% of policymakers might underestimate the real impact of untreated waste. And part of that seems to be the language itself, distancing them from the harsh truth.
So what does that mean practically? In the U.S., you said half of sewage sludge is reused as fertilizer. That sounds good.
It does on the surface, but public discomfort, that stigma we talked about, severely limits how widely it's adopted. Only about 20% of farmers are currently using it, according to USDA data.
Only 20%. Wow. So the potential is much higher.
Much higher. And interestingly, some research suggests that just using clearer, more direct language could potentially boost those recycling rates, maybe by as much as 15%.
Just from changing the words.
It seems language plays a big role in acceptance. And look at the sheer variety of terms. You've got humanure, coined back in '94, focusing on composting, used by maybe 30% of eco-communities. Then fecal sludge dominates the technical documents, maybe 70% of World Bank usage. But you still find poetic traces like the waste of the night in older texts. One linguistic study from 2023 actually cataloged over 200 distinct euphemisms globally.
200?
Yeah. All reflecting these different cultural attitudes, from deep shame to just practical utility. And biosolids, that term really took off after EPA campaigns in the 90s. Now it's in like 80% of U.S. wastewater marketing materials.
Which brings us back to that social media comment.
Exactly, the one with 12,000 likes. Biosolids sounds like a health food, not sewage. It really hits the nail on the head, doesn't it?
And it totally does. Okay, so we've talked about history, the different types of terms. How do these linguistic choices actually ripple outwards into things like environmental policy, or even just how we culturally avoid the topic?
Well, by softening the reality of waste, terms like sewage sludge can definitely reduce the sense of urgency, and that has real consequences. For example, studies suggest around 30% of U.S. municipalities have delayed essential infrastructure upgrades, partly because of public apathy. The language doesn't exactly scream crisis.
Right, it feels less urgent. But conversely, you're saying direct language can work.
It seems so. Take India's Swachh Bharat initiative from 2024. They used very direct language in their sanitation campaigns. And guess what? Sanitation funding reportedly increased by 20%.
Wow. So directness can actually motivate action.
It appears it can. And culturally, these euphemisms also reflect our avoidance.
Yeah.
That 2023 social psychology study, it found 70% of people in Western societies actively avoid discussing waste.
70%, that's huge.
Compare that to maybe only 40% in more agrarian cultures, where historically night soil had value. It shows a real cultural divide in confronting the issue.
You know, this reminds me, I actually did a bit of a personal digging into this recently. Visited a wastewater facility here in the U.S.
Oh, really? What was that like?
Eye-opening. The workers there were quite frank. One guy told me straight up, calling it biosolids helps sell it to farmers.
Wow. Just laid it out there.
Yeah, a practical economic reason for the euphemism. Then I went to this urban farming workshop, and the topic of composting humanure came up.
Okay. How did that go over?
Surprisingly well, actually. Out of maybe 30 attendees, I'd say roughly 60% seemed genuinely open to the idea. But there was always this caveat. If the stigma could somehow be lessened.
The stigma again. It's always there.
Always. And I spoke to a historian, too, who just put it so powerfully. Night soil fed 19th century crops. Now it's taboo. That really stuck with me. My journey even sparked some debate online. A post I made got like 15,000 likes asking, why are we so shy about waste value? The whole experience just drove home how much these words shape our attitudes, our actions.
That's a great example. And connecting it all back to the bigger picture. The language we choose has enormous implications, not just culturally, but for global sanitation, for the economy. Using clearer, more direct language, it could potentially save an estimated $1 trillion by 2030.
$1 trillion? How?
Simply by improving waste recycling and resource recovery. Right now in the U.S., about half of all biosolids are just landfilled. That's like 10 million tons of potential fertilizer just wasted.
That's staggering. An environmental loss and a huge economic one, too.
Exactly. But there's hope. Education campaigns, like some that reached 5 million people in 2024, they've shown they can reduce that stigma, sometimes by as much as 15%.
So education is key.
It really highlights the need to re-educate ourselves about something so fundamental. As that one viral post put it, the one with 20,000 likes, schools should teach waste's value.
Yeah, maybe they should. So wrapping this up, what's the main takeaway here? These euphemisms, humanure, biosolids, fecal sludge, they really act like a window into our deep cultural attitudes, don't they?
Absolutely. One review found 70% of them essentially mask the raw reality of waste.
Something that was historically vital, boosting crops by 20%, now often clashes with modern taboos. And with, what, 4.2 billion people still lacking safe sanitation globally?
Using clear, honest language isn't just about being direct, is it? It could be a powerful catalyst for policy change, for innovation.
It really could.
It's like that social media post said, call it poop and face the truth. By really unpacking these terms, you, the listener, gain this crucial insight into waste, into culture, and ultimately, into sustainability. So here's a final thought for you to chew on. What if? What if, by simply embracing more direct language about human waste, we could actually unlock its true potential? See it as a resource. Could that foster better sanitation, spark agricultural innovation, and ultimately help build a healthier planet for all of us? Something to think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Please don't forget to share your thoughts and your location in the comments below. Help us grow the Mind Expansion Daily community. And definitely be sure to check out our next deep dive, where we'll be tackling more linguistic taboos.